Hello, Jason here. Today I'm continuing with my Stephen King reading project video, or video series. And so originally what I was going to do with this whole thing was I was going to read the books in chronological order from when they were published and then recap decades. So I did a 1970s video, and then I was going to do a 1980s video, and I was looking at all these books. And there's a lot of them. There's like 18 novels or whatever. There's a lot. And I figured that's probably too many to do in just one video. Otherwise, it'd be like an hour long. So I'm going to split it into two parts. The 80s are going to be split into two parts. And so this one is, I just split it right down the middle. I did 9 in one video. I'm going to do 9 in the next video. This one goes from 1980 to 1983. He was busy in the beginning of the 80s. He put out a lot of stuff. So anyway, we'll get started with 1980. And his first novel in the 80s was Firestarter. This came out in 1980. Love this book. It's not, in my top 5, but it's certainly good. And it's one that I don't think gets talked about that much. I know there was a movie with Drew Barrymore. I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to whether it's any good or not. I've heard it's pretty good, but basically the story is about this guy and his daughter. Her name's Charlie. They have special powers, psychic powers or whatever. He can he calls it the push. He can basically tell people to do stuff and psychically persuade them and make them do stuff. But it hurts him to do it, so he doesn't do it unless he really needs that. She also has sort of something like that, where she can it's more like telekinesis. She breaks open payphones and steals change out of them. That's how they make money, because they're on the run. But her main power, the power that this book's mainly about, is she's a pyrokinetic. She can create fire, and whatever, blow things up. So yeah, they're on the run. They're the government is after them. There's this agency called the Shop, super secret agency, looking for them, trying to get them, they want to do experiments and stuff on Charlie to see how she's able to do what she does, and maybe even weaponize her. But God, it's just really good. Their relationship is really just awesome. There's a couple of really cool action set pieces that are just great. There's one character in the second half of the book. His name's Rainbird, and he's he's a villain. He's a bad guy, but he's just so awesome. I really liked that character. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, this is just a really cool book. So I do highly recommend Firestarter by Stephen King. Hold it up one more time. Next up is a Bachman book, actually. So another one of his, 4 early-ish novels that he published under a pen name Richard Bachman. And this one is called Roadwork. This one came out in 1981. And I don't have the actual book, but I've got the collection of the 4 called the Bachman books. These you can pick up pretty cheap, $15 or so on Amazon, or whatever, $20. So if you haven't read these, you really should just pick up the collection. 3 of them are still in print, but one of them isn't. So if you want to read that one, you're going to have to get this collection. But anyway, Roadwork came out in 1981. That's what the cover looks like. And yeah, this is not my favorite. Slow burn for sure. It's basically about this guy who they're building they're gonna build a highway through where his house is. So the city's buying up all the properties around there that they need, and this guy's refusing to sell his house. Because he's I've lived here for a bajillion years and I don't want to sell my house to the city. So they come in and they make him. And nothing really happens for the entire story other than him preparing. And it's it's all told through his perspective, and it's a lot of him like just internalizing this like what he's going to do and thinking about how he's going to handle this, and he doesn't handle it well. But yeah, there's a final showdown that's kind of interesting and stuff, but it all just builds this one big thing. And I mean, it wasn't bad, it's just not, it's not great. Yeah, it's okay. If you're a completionist, I'd say go ahead and read it, but it's definitely not my favorite Stephen King. So yeah, next novel is Cujo, published 1981. I feel like this one is a pretty popular one. The movie was pretty popular. It was pretty good. It's a lot different than the book, especially the ending. But holy man, this is one of my favorite Stephen King novels. I love this book. Yeah, very few authors have the balls to do what Stephen King did in this novel, especially the ending. But it's just such a cool book because it's okay. So the basic story is this lady and her son Tad are their car is broken on the fritz, and so she needs to take it to get fixed. And her husband's out of town doing some crap, I don't remember. He like works for like a cereal company or something, and he's like out of town on business. And so she takes her car to this like mechanic who's out in the country, and when she gets there, her car dies like as she's pulling in, whatever. And then their dog the mechanic's dog is running around. It's big Saint Bernard. It's running around. It's got rabies, and it has killed the mechanic. It's killed, people around and stuff. And it's basically like they can't leave her. She can't leave her car. And it's the middle of summer. It's like 100 degrees out. So they're like basically trapped in a car, dying of heat stroke. And there's this dog that if they get out is going to just ravage them to death. So yeah, they're in a sticky spot. And it also, like, what I love about this book is it like layers in like various coincidences and things where like, there's all these things that happen that like if things had happened just a little bit differently, then they would have known where she was. They would have been able to like find out like yeah, because like one of the kind of side stories, I don't want to give too much away, but she's having an affair with this guy and she calls it off and he gets really crazy. And so he comes over to her house and like while she's, trapped or whatever, and he doesn't know she's trapped. He just comes over because he's a jerk and he trashes the place and all this stuff. And he leaves a note and like whatever saying, ha ha ha, you suck or whatever. And then, so the cops get involved obviously with this. And, so they're tracking this guy down for like hours and hours and hours because they assume that he like took her or something, So they're like, we got to find this guy. But if instead of doing that, they had focused their energy on like finding her, because there was some things that didn't add up, like where's her car? Did they take both, like his car and her car? Like it was just very weird. So that was really cool. It's also a lot about like marriage and family and what that means and how those like that all those relationships work. So it's like it's this 80s King thing that he did a lot where he would have really intense like adult thematic elements underneath this like gripping horror story, and it's beautifully done. And the thing that is also amazing about this book, if you know much about Stephen King, he was at this time doing a lot of drugs and drinking a lot of alcohol. And apparently, he has said in interviews that he doesn't even remember writing this novel, which is dumbfounding to me because it is brilliant. So, yeah, gotta hand it to him. I mean, drunk, high King can really just knock it out of the park. So, Cujo, it's a must-read for Stephen King fans, in my opinion. Next one is it's the last of the 4 Bachman books in this collection, and it is called The Running Man. I'll hold up that's what the cover looks like. Yeah, it. This is my favorite Bachman book. This or maybe The Long Walk, but yeah, and I almost is funny because they're both about game shows, like death cult game shows, and so I when I was reading this, I was like, oh, these exist in the same universe. They're just different shows in the same like timeline, in the same, like it's because they're both kind of about how we're obsessed with television and how we're obsessed with games, and then also add that layer of like morbidity and death on there, like the gladiator type thing, and you've got these two shows. So I kind of just imagined, and that's probably not true necessarily in the canon, but I just imagined my head canon is that they exist in the same world. But anyway, and if you've seen the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, it is not, there is barely anything like the same. They're, other than the title and like the basic premise of the game show, it's not at all the same. So even if you've seen the movie, I highly recommend you read the book. It's really good. The ending, is like amazing, and I don't know. I don't want to give it away because it's so good, but you could not. I don't think this book would get published today without him having to change the ending, because it's a little close to some stuff that happened in real life that I don't think would pass muster these days. So anyway, it's a great book. It's about a game show where they pick one guy and he has to run. He's on the run, and all these people are chasing him, and basically he's got like a bounty on his head. Anyone who kills him gets a bunch of money, but if he survives for a certain amount of time, I think it's 30 days, he gets a whole bunch of money. And the network is run by the government or whatever, or like the like society's gotten to the point where TV and government are like so intertwined that they're basically like the same entity, because it's all money and politics and stuff like that. So it's about how the government suppresses poor people and like makes them do stuff for like the entertainment of the masses. And yeah, and then the main character is just like games it. He games the system, and he ends up kind of beating it. Kind of, I don't know. You should read it. It's really good. Yeah. That came out in 1982, by the way. Next book is The Dark Tower 1, The Gunslinger. This was also published in 1982. Yeah, oh my god. So, The Dark Tower series, I read a few years ago, and then I've reread it since then, and it is the best book series I've ever read in my life. It's amazing. It changed the way I think about what fiction can be and stuff. So anyway, that's actually what got me wanting to read all of Stephen King's work, was because if you know anything about The Dark Tower, you know that it's like, it is the crux of the like Stephen King multiverse. All of his books kind of intertwine and intermingle, and they kind of all diverge with like The Dark Tower is the center of the whole thing. So I read The Dark Tower. I had read a couple other Stephen King novels before that, but The Dark Tower was really like kind of my first. I had read it, and I had read The Shining. And those were the only two novels that I had read, and Doctor Sleep, before I read The Dark Tower. So going into it, yeah, I hadn't read a lot of Stephen King, but I fell in love. And after reading it, I was like, I got to read the rest of his stuff. So that's where I started this. But anyway, so The Gunslinger is the first Dark Tower book. It's not my favorite Dark Tower book by a long chalk. It's probably maybe my sixth favorite. There's 7. Well, there's, I guess, kind of 8 books in the series. But yeah, it's really good. But it's more, especially for the first time read through, it's much better the second time you've read the series. But it's basically an introduction to a couple characters, and it doesn't really go too far into like story. It basically just sets everything up and then leaves you at this like kind of cliffhanger, which then the next book just is off and running. So a lot of people don't like this book because it's kind of weird, and there's a lot of stuff in here that you're gonna be like, what does that mean? What does that mean? That will become more clear as you read the series. And especially, like I said, if you finish the series and then you go back and read this one, you'll be like, oh yeah, get it. So yeah, I love this book. It's just dear to my heart. So yeah, if you haven't read The Dark Tower, get on it. It's really good, and it's long. It's like 7 or 8 books, and some of them are chunkers. But I read the whole thing in like 3 months. Yeah, it's really good. So anyway, The Dark Tower. And another thing, this edition that I have is really cool. It's got cool illustrations, which this is not the edition that I read, but I found this one at like a secondhand store, and it has these really cool like illustrations throughout that are neat. Like cool things that kind of just add another layer to the story. I've got a couple of these illustrated editions of the Dark Tower books, and they're fun. It's like a cool way to experience the book that's different. But anyway, Dark Tower, read it. Next one is a novella collection. It's called Different Seasons. Came out in 1982. Yeah, there's 4 novellas in here. So the Shawshank Redemption. Well, Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. That's the novel or the novella that the Shawshank Redemption is based on. There's one called Apt Pupil, which there's a movie for as well. It's got Gandalf in it, which is pretty cool. I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's good. The Body is the movie Stand By Me is based on The Body. And then the last one is called The Breathing Method. There's no film adaptation, and there probably never will be because it's not very good. Maybe there would be. It would be a weird one to adapt. But anyway, this is amazing. This is his first novella collection that he put out, and it is every single one of these, except for I didn't really like the Breathing Method. There were elements of it that I thought were good, but all 3 of these are amazing, and they're not really horror, other than Apt Pupil, I guess is horror, or at least it's disturbing. But yeah, they're just so good. The Body made me cry. Shawshank Redemption, it's so, and actually, the book is really, really good, but I'd almost say the movie's better. So, because the movie fleshes out some of the stuff in the book because it's pretty short. I think it's only like 150 pages. So the movie does maybe do a little bit better job in certain elements, but other elements, I think the book is better. You should read both. You should read the book and then go watch the movie. But anyway, yeah, it's Different Seasons is amazing. So I highly recommend that one too. Next one is just a fun one. It's Christine, and it came out in 1983. I haven't seen the movie, but yeah, it's about this is just a fun kind of pulpy high school novel. Like, yeah, there's not too much deep. There's nothing too deep in this. I mean, I guess it is kind of about like friendship and stuff, but mostly it's about a haunted car. So a kid gets obsessed with this car, he buys it, and then he starts fixing it up, and turns out it's haunted by its previous owner, and he's a real dick. And or I guess it was haunted even before that. But anyway, so it's about how this kid gets kind of like sucked in by this possessed car, and things happen. There's bullies, and there's love triangle stuff going on. There's kind of it's kind of like it's about high school kids, so it's kind of that sort of thing, like a high school drama sort of. It's kind of funny too. Like it's an interesting book because it's not it's Stephen King not taking himself very seriously, or at least the book is serious and it's a good book, but it's fun. It's not heavy, and so yeah, this is just a fun kind of beach read one. I would say, yeah, you should read this one. It's not top of my list, but it's a good one. So Christine, check it out. This one is heavy. This one is probably one of Stephen King's heaviest novels, and this is Pet Sematary, published in 1983. This one, in contrast to Christine, is super dark and deals with grief and loss of a loved one and how you manage that and how you deal with that, and the question of if you could bring them back, would you? Is that a good thing to do? Even if you're in pain, would it help? And all of those come together in it's just a beautifully written book. It's so good, and yeah, it's devastating, but it's so good. So yeah, this is definitely, I mean, this is like top 10 material right here. This is Stephen King at his best. And even he's said that this is his scariest book. Which maybe I'd say it's one of his scariest books for sure that I've read. Yeah, so so Pet Sematary. What it's about is a family. They move into a new house in like smallish town in Maine. Weird, and it's kind of right by a big highway. So there's trucks going by all the time. But anyway, there's like a pet cemetery that the local kids use when their pets die and get hit by trucks in the road. Where they bury their pets, and it's kind of like back behind their property or like in the back of their property. So yeah, that's the basic premise, and then their cat dies, so they bury it there. Or yeah, then other stuff happens. It's weird. So they find out that there's another burial ground beyond that has some like Native American juju like magic that will bring whatever you bury there back from the dead. So yeah, that's the story, or that's the setup at least. And yeah, like I said, it is a sad, disturbing, upsetting book. So you should read it. And the last book, published in 1983. It's not really even a book. It's kind of, I mean, yeah, I guess I'll call it a book. It's Cycle of the Werewolf. And this is an illustrated, like, calendar type thing. It's weird. It's really short. Like, you can read it in a sitting. It's basically, he goes through each month and tells a little story, right? A little, like, literally a very short, like, 2-page story each month. And there's little illustrations and stuff. The illustrations are pretty cool, but it's about a werewolf. It's like every month when the moon comes out, he kills some people in this town. And I mean, that's basically what it's about. And it's about, this kid who's trying to figure out like who it is and catch them and stuff like that. There was a film adaptation. It was called The Silver Bullet, I think. And I haven't seen it, but you can see a pattern. There's a lot. Almost every single one of these has a film adaptation. So in the 80s, that's what Hollywood was all about, was just adapting Stephen King novels. And some of them were good and some of them weren't. But anyway, that's all for this one, for this video. I'm going to do 1984 through 1989 next. I don't know when I'll get to that. It'll probably be a couple weeks. But yeah, that's it. So like and subscribe, and yeah, look forward to the next books or videos in this series. I'm going to keep reading Stephen King until I'm done. I'm about halfway through the 90s right now. So, yeah, so I'm going to do the 80s video, and then the 90s might be a while, depending on how long it takes me to get through those books. I'm reading other stuff as well during this whole thing. I'm not just reading Stephen King. So yeah, that's it, I guess. Thanks for watching, and stay healthy, stay safe, and keep reading. Thanks. Peace.